Hello and welcome to New College Swindon. Today's college experience session is all about esports and game ethics. So let's have a little look about what this session's going to be about. First of all, there are some hardware and software requirements that you need in order to complete today's activities. So firstly, just make sure that you are using a suitable computer, laptop or device. Make sure that you've got sufficient internet access, and hopefully you've got some sort of speaker or headphones. Otherwise you won't be able to hear me, but also there is an opportunity for you to watch a video later today in this workshop. And finally, just make sure that you have access to either Microsoft Word or a similar piece of software to complete the activity for today. So, game ethics and all about esports. Now, there are loads and loads of video games, and I'm sure if you're looking and participating in today's workshop that you would have played some sort of game, whether that's on console, for example, PlayStation or Xbox, or whether it's online, going on to Miniclip, for example, or playing games through social media like Facebook, for example, Farmville or Candy Crush. There are loads and loads of games. Now, with those games, they're all given a rating, which is known as a PEGI rating. And that rating is based on the content within the game itself. And in the last few months, the government and the games trade body Yuki have been working on trying to ensure that gambling and in-game purchases are included in the PEGI guidance and part of the PEGI rating system for certain games. Now, there are, believe it or not, 55,000 students or children even, aged between 11 and 16 that have gambling problems due to video games. So my first question for you, have you ever played a game that you think encourages either gambling or in-game purchases? If you have downloaded the worksheet that goes with this workshop, then please make sure that you pop your ideas into that worksheet for me. If you haven't, then it should be on the VLE. It's just a Word document. It's got 5 questions in there. So the first question, have you ever played a game that you think encourages either gambling or in-game purchases? So I'll give you just a minute or so just to jot down some ideas. So the sorts of things you might be looking at is downloadable content within a video game, or loot boxes, for example, any games that include loot boxes. Okay, so let's have a look. I've got some ideas here for you. I've listed 3 popular games, all of which encourage gambling and in-game purchases. So, for example, let's take FIFA as the first one on the list. So, in-game purchases. In FIFA, you go out and you buy the game and you spend £48. That's what I have recently on FIFA 21. You spend £48 on a video game. You expect, just to pay that and enjoy the game itself. But the problem is, it's not just that, because if you want to play online and you want to play the FIFA Ultimate Team, there is the option there for players to buy virtual FIFA points, and those FIFA points contribute to, you can use them to buy FIFA packs. Now those FIFA packs are all randomized, and it's about getting the best players for your team. So not only does it encourage in-game purchases, it also encourages gambling, because it is a gamble on whether you're going to get a good player or just average players using your FIFA points. But also it's a little bit more about just money. It's about non-money gambling, so to speak. So you think about the amount of time that you invest into a video game, For example, on FIFA, again, I'll stick with FIFA as we've spoken about it. You can invest hours and hours and hours of your time trying to work out solutions, play games, little challenges for FIFA packs. And again, those FIFA packs are all randomized. So again, you could just get bang average players. So those are a couple of the things that we might need to consider if we were to run an esports tournament. Okay, so gambling and in-game purchases are something that we need to think about, certainly if we're to run an esports tournament, and that is part of the qualification. You will be expected to run your own esports tournament. A little bit more on that later on. So just to re-emphasize, 55,000 children, this report was published in July 2020, aged between 11 and 16 have gambling addictions, and that is stemmed from video games. So the PEGI rating, there's a number of different ratings that we can have, and I'm sure you've seen them on videos, DVDs, Blu-rays, music, apps, of course, video games. So there are a number of different age ratings here. So we've got 3, 7, 12, 16, 18. Now what happens with the PEGI rating is that all games or game developers, so let's focus on games as it's an esports qualification. So game developers are asked to submit what age rating they believe their game is at based on certain criteria. And that criteria is based on bad language, any discrimination. Again, we've just mentioned about gambling and in-game purchases, any sexual references in games, any violence or drugs. Now all of that will contribute to an overall PEGI rating. Not all games will have all of those things included. It may just have one thing included. For example, it could just include violence. And that will give a PEGI rating based on the nature of the game. Or indeed, it could have a combination of different things. So it could have bad language, sexual references, violence, drugs. Not all of the criteria there, but a large share of it. So developers are asked to submit what they believe the game should be aimed at in terms of the PEGI rating. And after that, it's then checked by the VSC, who are the people that are validate the PEGI rating. Now, there is a video on the next slide. I will let you decide if you want to watch that in your own time. It's a very useful video. It talks all about the PEGI rating process, and certainly it focuses on games in this particular video clip. So I'll leave that on this presentation if you want to go back and watch that in your own time. Okay, so next question for you. Thinking about esports and game ethics, can you think of any games that you recently played? Could be online, could be on a console, and what PEGI rating that they come under. Okay. I want you to think about the content in the game which may have contributed to the PEGI rating. So I've given you a couple of examples here. We've got Grand Theft Auto. I'm sure you've all heard of Grand Theft Auto. If you haven't, do have a look at it online. In terms of the content, I'm not suggesting you go out and play it as an 18 rating. And some of the content that contributes to that overall PEGI rating is bad language, sexual references, there's lots of violence in it, there's drug scenes in it, discrimination as well. Okay, so just to give you an idea, that content there for Grand Theft Auto contributes to the overall PEGI rating of an 18. A game that I played recently, because we run the esports competition here, is Super Smash Brothers on Nintendo Switch. The PEGI rating is a 12. You might think, oh, you know, it's Super Mario Brothers, but the violence contributes to a 12 rating. So what I'd like you to do is just spend a couple of minutes thinking about any games that you've played and see if you can pop in the game titles, the PEGI rating, and the PEGI content for those games. Again, this this task is on the activity sheet that you should have downloaded from the VLE. Okay, so now that we've mentioned a little bit about PEGI ratings and what we might need to consider for different games, I want you to think about being told that you're going to run an esports tournament. What kind of things do you think you would need to consider to run a successful tournament? Now, these tournaments, can be local with the school or the college. Then there's likely to be regional finals, and then a national final. Now, at the college, we have been in an esports tournament for the past 4 years, and is the expectation when you join us on this course that you will run the esports tournament here at the college. So how are you going to make it successful, even more successful than it's already been? So let's have a look at what you might need to do. So you're going to run the esports tournament. What things on the activity sheet that you've got, I'd like you to think about some of the things that you might need to consider when running a successful tournament. For example, you might want to think about the type of game that you're going to pick, okay, based on the target audience. For example, if we're running a game at college, not all students are going to be 18, so picking a game that has a PEGI rating of 18 would not be suitable, okay, because you're minimizing your target audience. If that's just one thing to consider as an esports tournament organizer. So I'm just going to give you a couple of moments just to see if you can jot down some ideas of what you will consider to be a successful tournament. Okay, I've got a couple of ideas here for you. So think about the game rules. Now, what do we know about game rules? Well, each game will have the basic rules, okay? It will just have the rules, the controls, the basic understanding of how to complete the game itself, but they can be changed. For example, again, I'll continue with FIFA, as I've mentioned it throughout this presentation. With FIFA, you can change the rules in it, so you can change the time of each game. So from 6 minutes for a match to 12 minutes for a match, or you can go up to 45 minutes for a match. Being consistent with the game rules. Again, you could say you could play with Ultimate Team, which might put some people at a disadvantage, or you could say if you would just have a random friendly kickoff mode, someone might pick an international team, for example, like Belgium. And someone else might pick just a club football team like Swindon Town, for example, and that would be an unfair advantage, obviously. So game rules is an important thing to consider. Already mentioned about picking a suitable game. Think about the PEGI, think about a target audience. The location of tournament. Well, in this case, you would be running it at a school or certainly at New College, but whereabouts in the college would you be running your tournament? Okay, and also think about where your regional finals might be, where your grand final might be, the number of people that you're going to have involved in your esports tournament. If you have a couple of hundred people, which would be absolutely fantastic, how are you going to manage their expectations? How are you going to successfully organize 200 games, log in their results to find the best team to win the esports tournament? Esport team names as well. So again, picking or ensuring that all teams or participants have suitable and appropriate esport team names. And finally, the game hardware. Okay, believe it or not, game hardware is one of the most what can I say, controversial topics when running an esports tournament. Lots of students like consoles, other students like PCs. There's always a big debate about which one we should be using for an esports tournament. So game hardware is something to consider. So what I'd like you to do, the next stage, this requires a little bit of independent research. What I'd like you to do is think about different hardware needed to run an esports tournament. So let's say that you've decided to pick a game, or you're thinking about running an esports tournament at the college. What console would you pick? So what I'd like you to do, in here, on your activity sheet again, this is found, console, list the price, portability, and also, if you can, research the speed of that console. The speed will have an impact, certainly when you're competing online with others. So as an example, in this case, I've said, let's look at the Nintendo Switch. The cost is quite pricey. It's £279.99. That's not the light version of the Switch, I must add. Portability, well, it's handheld, which is great, because it means that we can run the esports tournament anywhere in the college that we want. And the speed, obviously, you know, it's got a fairly decent processor in there. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to think about other consoles. You may want to look at PlayStation 5 or the Xbox, latest Xbox that's coming out, or you can look at something completely different. So I'll give that ownership over to you, and I'll give you a couple of minutes to complete that activity. Okay, hopefully you've come up with some ideas there for game consoles. Next task is to think about 3 suitable games of your choice. Now, what I'd like you to do in this instance, pick a console that you've just looked at. Which console are you going to select and run your esports tournament? So if you're going to go with the Nintendo Switch in this case, what I'd like you to do is think about different games for the Nintendo Switch. As an example, Super Smash Brothers, absolutely fantastic game. To run it here at New College Swindon, the PEGI rating is at 12, so all students would be able to participate in this. The hardware here would be Nintendo Switch, age 12 plus. So what I'd like you to do is think about other game titles. Doesn't have to be for the Switch, the console that you would use to run the esports tournament here at New College Swindon. So I'll give you a few more minutes to think about games that you would pick. Okay, so now that you've identified your game and your hardware, that would be the start of trying to think about game ethics. The session would be moving into game rules, changing game rules, having a look at the aspect of trying to ensure that the tournament is fair, that all participants are aware of the rules. Also, this workshop would also encourage you to go away and do some actual research, primary and secondary research. So you'd be expected to do some research with students in the college and staff to work out what games they would like. Also to think about genders involved in this, okay, because gaming is not just a male-dominated sport. There's lots of females that are into gaming as well. So hopefully that's given you a flavour of the esports qualification. I say this is just a very small nugget of what you'll be learning on this qualification. So we look forward to seeing you in September 2021. For further information, please use the link below to find a little bit more about the course. Thank you very much.